You've been hiding, never letting it show, always trying to keep it under control. You got down, and you're well on your way to the top. But there's something that you forgot. What about love? Don't you want someone to care about you? Hello everyone, my name is Ian Garcia, this is Devotional Criticism, and welcome back to the New Movie Diary. This is a cinema criticism series in which I review recent, new, and up-and-coming film releases and attempt to give you the straight facts about them, in my humble opinion. And in my humble opinion, the theme of this past weekend at the movies was blue. Between Superman coming out last weekend and still cleaning up at the box office, and Disney coming through with their new Fantastic Four this past Thursday, it has been the bluest weekend at the movies since the last Avatar. Just super blue. The costumes are super blue, the sky is super blue, we got shining blue water and snow and ice everywhere, even the buildings are super blue, it's just all blue everything. And I already said my piece about not being in such a hurry to see Superman in my last vid when I reviewed The Village Next to Paradise, and as far as Fantastic Four, I'm still doing my own private, informal protest of Disney just because I've decided even if this flick proves to be an even passable tentpole, it's not worth humoring after having had to suffer through two productions as thoroughly, disastrously awful as Captain America 4 and Snow White. So here we are. I'm not going to be chasing after the big moneymakers. For me, this past weekend was an opportunity to sigh with relief as I made my gingerly way through the teeming hordes assembled to pay their tithe to the great Satan that is comic book movies, to a smaller theater in the multiplex in the very wing of it that was showing a new indie rom-com that I wasn't even particularly excited to see, only to find myself not only pleasantly surprised, but one of those highlights of my movie-going experience that I look forward to all year, an off-the-beaten-path production that is receiving none of the same publicity push of a major studio production that virtually nobody is aware of, even if they might be exactly the sort of, say, childless, mature adults like me who would be more inclined to see a movie that is both entertaining and accessible, while also not being about a bunch of fantasy stuff that doesn't relate to or touch on anything that is particularly meaningful to my day-to-day experience of life, and then ends up honestly being one of my favorite movies of the year at this point, and maybe even going further than that to say that it's practically my movie of the year as far as how this little, tiny, funny, sexy, accessible indie rom-com manages to slurry so many of the different themes and motifs of even some of the much higher profile independent and art house movies I've seen this year, and seems to so effortlessly present a spin on all of these themes and motifs that even makes me kinda take a step back and wonder, man, even among those indie and art house movies, those higher profile ones that I already liked or loved, is this little production just kind of coming along and outperforming them all, at least in its own small ways. The subject of today's entry of the New Movie Diary is Oh, Hi, a twisted romantic comedy written and directed by one Sophie Brooks and starring Molly Gordon and Logan Lerman as a couple who, having been dating for 4 months, go on their first romantic weekend getaway together, which, for Gordon's character Iris, is a huge deal. It's perhaps enough to say that Gordon is very sincerely portraying a relatable comedic archetype of our times, a really enthusiastic and sweet girl who wants more than anything to be in a real, committed relationship, and is so often disappointed by the endless situationships, the lack of commitment from men her own age, while at the same time no love and respect for this character is lost on the caveat that, she might be a little bit crazy. Just a little, Like, maybe she wants to be in a relationship a little too much. Maybe it's actually her insecure attachment issues that are preceding her dating and sexual history rather than the other way around. After having spent so much intimate time with Lerman's character, Isaac, having received so much more than the bare minimum from him, having developed such a close, secure relationship with him in such a short amount of time, and that last part is kind of the motivational kicker, because one of the most important insights that I think Brooks as a writer laces into
Iris's dialogue is something to the effect of, I just can't believe how easy this feels. And that's a really important sign in any kind of relationship, I think, when a person whose attachment style is probably very insecure is finally able to relate to somebody in a way that feels secure and easy and like they don't feel like they have to be someone else or overextend themselves. I mean, Lord knows, I've certainly been happy to hear very similar sentiments from both women and men I've known in my life who tend to form insecure attachments and then finally meet someone who really seems to get them at their most transparent and authentic self. So yes, it's a very short amount of time, but in all of this time, he's been very close, he's been very giving, he's been very cute, he's been very soft, he's been very nurturing. They're going on a weekend trip together. She has reason to be excited. And then right after she says about how easy getting into a relationship with him felt, because of course, for her side of it, it is easy. Why would she assume that something that feels so easy to her is not what this other person is thinking, especially when they keep acting like a boyfriend anyway? And then Isaac says he's not interested in dating her exclusively. And not even really only that, but that, like, he has been seeing other women while they've been in a relationship, all of this lavishing of affection, all of this intimacy, all of this stuff that Iris just got done saying that this is exactly the sort of easy, mutual, secure relationship she's been looking for. Turns out that this has just been a situationship for Isaac this whole time. So quite the confession to make, and unfortunately for Isaac, he only lets the cat out of the bag after. So previously, Iris picks the lock of a closet in the house they're renting. Kinda a red flag there already. She says, locked doors make me feel anxious. Look, whatever your opinion of Isaac in this scenario, it's one thing to say that Iris has red flags of being that archetype of the crazy girl, but Isaac is also just kind of overlooking them. So that's its own red flag. Ignoring red flags is a red flag. Not like I would know anything about that at all. None at all. Anyway, Iris picks this lock of this closet and finds it filled with lingerie and sex toys and bondage equipment, and so that night she and Isaac decide to do some kinky stuff. And so Isaac only ends up making this confession to Iris about how he sees their relationship, the situation they are in together, once he's already been bound by his wrists and ankles to a bed. Iris, having already established herself as this archetypal insecure crazy girl, obviously doesn't take this situation too well, decides to leave Isaac tied to the bed for the rest of the night. Well, I guess that was warranted. That's actually pretty okay. But she sleeps on the couch downstairs and ends up spiraling down a dark rabbit hole of scouring the internet for solutions to her present problem, where she, of course, exactly what she in her most insecure and desperate state wants to hear, which is that there might be some way to exploit this situation to convince Isaac that he doesn't only want to be in a sexual relationship, that all that intimacy and affection wasn't just a formality, it was real, and all I need to do is do what my mom, the therapist, and this self-help author I found on the internet says, which is to show you how much what you actually want is to just settle down and have a real relationship with somebody. Because why would you act like a boyfriend if you didn't want to be a boyfriend? You must be in denial. Which, of course, all means that Isaac is going to stay bound to the bed naked until further notice. And I wouldn't say that things spiral out of control from there or anything, even to the extent that Brooks and Gordon herself. Gordon is credited as co-conceiving the story for the film, even to the extent that this writer-director and this actress are collaborating on this story of a woman with insecure attachments resorting to kidnapping in order to force a guy to love her. Oh Hi certainly complicates as it goes on, but the verve that this movie is on, even as it goes on to implicate Iris's overly humoring best friend Max, she's played by Geraldine Viswanathan, who I was absolutely delighted to see back on the big screen following her starring role in Ethan Coen and Trisha Cook's Drive Away Dolls. She comes into the situation bringing along her boyfriend Kenny, played by John Reynolds, but while matters are complicated, again, the comedic tone of Oh Hi really isn't on that wavelength of a lot of contemporary indie movies, even comedic ones, where the narrative is basically a downward spiraling series of stress-inducing set pieces. Even as Iris ends up digging herself further and further into this ditch she's in, Oh Hi is still primarily framed by Brooks as a more or less conventional, accessible, contemporary romantic comedy. And quite frankly, one of the most refreshing things about it, as far as it's being a more conventional romantic comedy, is that there even seems to be a degree to which Brooks is playing with a more classical influence in the form of the screwball comedy. Obviously, the history of the romantic comedy is already so intertwined with the classic screwball comedy, but I think part of what made Oh Hi so much more particularly effective for me than a lot of modern or more recent romantic comedies that gesture at those sorts of classic Hollywood sentiments is that they either always feel like they are trying too hard to be up to date and current, or they just kind of wear the affectations of the screwball comedy as a patina when the stories themselves don't actually do what a screwball comedy should do and is what makes it refreshingly distinct from a romantic comedy. A romantic comedy for me is either just a romantic story with a comedic tone or a comedy film with a romantic plot. A screwball comedy is never just a love story, but very often uses the foil of the conventional romantic story to poke fun at just how ridiculous and goofy and screwy people can be. Especially when they are either over the moon in love, or they are in denial about the fact that they are in love sometimes. I can gesture to a classic from 1938, the Howard Hawks directed Bringing Up Baby, starring Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. If you haven't seen it, you really should, and if anything, you should take an exemplary screwball comedy like that in the context of our current archetypes with regards to dating and romance and sex. Everything from the so-called boy who only wants casual sex to the crazy girl who keeps falling into a pattern of becoming obsessed with one particular type of guy only to find out over and over again that being obsessed with someone isn't enough to make a relationship work. You can watch a movie like Bringing Up Baby, this hugely successful, critically acclaimed, much beloved romantic comedy of its day, and it's literally about Katharine Hepburn portraying this crazy girl who becomes obsessed with Cary Grant's stuff-shirted, repressed nerd and never taking no for an answer, looking for any and every opportunity to be around him, refusing to listen to any rejection from him, no matter how clear, interpreting every coincidence as some secret sign of his mutual obsession with her, projecting her own obsession onto him. The plot of Bringing Up Baby is literally about a crazy girl who wears down a man into loving her back, and the moral of the film apparently seems to be that, I don't know, that director Howard Hawks and the screenwriter Hagar Wilde, a woman author who also wrote the story the film is based upon before she co-wrote the screenplay with Dudley Nichols. The moral of the film seems to be that, yeah, man, sometimes if you really like someone, you just gotta wear them down a little, and sometimes if you do that enough, the person on the other end, even if they hate you kinda at first, sometimes they come around to realizing that, oh yeah, I have way more compatibility with you than anybody I've ever met. The opposites attract thing. Now, obviously, it's a fantasy and a problematic one, but if you're only looking to classic Hollywood films to be literal textual allegories for how people thought versus how they felt, you are doing yourself as much of a disservice as you would be if you were to only see a real person akin to Molly Gordon's character in Oh Hi and write them off as just some crazy girl. And what I think Oh Hi does so well in this almost anachronistic tone that it has as this kind of screwball rom-com being released in 2025, where there is so much anxiety in regards to dating and attachment and relationships, when besides all other political and economic and environmental and technological factors that might be exacerbating those things, there is clearly presently a kind of spiritual and emotional crisis that, while perhaps not totally unprecedented and unique in historical terms, is clearly plaguing post-Gen X people to a degree that we honestly seem to have more codes and terms and archetypes for people and styles of relationships than we do a secure consciousness about relationships at all. It would be one thing to say that Iris is only obsessed and not really in love with Isaac. But the thing about the screwball tone of Oh Hi is that Brooks kind of dispenses with that distinction. Like, no, the point is that Iris really is in love with Isaac, and for perfectly understandable reasons. He made love to her. He seduced her. But as Iris's bestie Max says at one point, love isn't enough. Relationships don't happen because of love, they happen because two people just kind of meet each other in the right place at the right time in their lives, respectively. By the same token, the point of Gordon's character here is not that she's crazy, it's that she's screwy. She's a screwball. She's screwed up in the head, but that's kind of the refreshing thing about a screwball comedy versus a more conventional modern romantic comedy, which is that a movie like Oh Hi is able at turns to be funny. I think Brooks has a great sense of situational humor and some great comic timing. It's also able to be really sexy in parts, and that was also really refreshing. It's honestly been a while since I've seen a movie in which I got to see big, bare, beautiful boobies up on the big screen and in a context where it wasn't like some dour international character study or some boutique extreme horror art film. It's just like, oh, right, this is what adults used to be able to go to the movies to do, which is to see movies that not only weren't broadly sex negative, but actually seemed to delight in being sexy, in being a little more gratuitous than they have to be, in not making it naturalistic. It's literally been so long since I've watched a movie for adults with a sex-positive attitude as simple as that, where yes, it's funny seeing Lerner's character go through this, but it's also just kind of sexy seeing a handsome guy with good abs and chest spread eagle on a mattress against his will. It's also just kind of fun and awesome to see Gordon's big, beautiful boobies in all their nude glory, even if it's just for one shot, because yeah, it doesn't demean her, it doesn't take away from the performance, and it is gratuitous. They didn't need to have that shot at all, they didn't need to shoot the scene that way. But they did because, thank God, apparently these are still filmmakers out here who like sexy stuff without preconditions and know that getting to see nudity in movies is supposed to be part of the fun of being an adult. Who knew? And of course, this whole bit where I stake my claim to being the thirstiest film critic on YouTube and the heir apparent to Roger Ebert, who I'm sure would have given Molly Gordon 2 thumbs way up. This whole bit is itself not just gratuitous, even this bit. That's what I mean. Because in the same way that Oh Hi is refreshing in that it doesn't seem to be succumbing to what I observe so much in even media for adults these days, which is, I think, an increasingly broad and non-exclusive sex negativity. It's not gratuitous because in the same way that so much of sexual content in even mainstream media for adults these days seems to be either modified by a dark tone or is otherwise treated with a higher degree of censoriousness for fear of upsetting anybody for any reason, you see in the major distinction between a romantic comedy and a screwball comedy. In the romantic comedy, the screwy qualities of a character are things to be diagnosed as what is wrong or at least flawed with them, and where there needs to be some prescribed solution to whatever character traits are keeping these two fated lovers from settling down and making babies. Whereas in the screwball comedy, the screwy parts of us, the screwed up parts of us, there is not and doesn't need to be a solution or a treatment. We are who we are. We're screwed up people. And what a movie like Oh Hi appeals to, even if the way this all wraps up is a twist on the screwball formula, Brooks does not go in the direction that Hagar Wilde went all the way back in the late 30s. What a movie like Oh Hi appeals to is that nascent sense that no, I am screwed up, and not because what others have done to me. There is no laundry list of transgressions that I uncovered in therapy. There is no Lexapro regimen in combination with vigorous routine exercise and a steady self-help media diet that is going to change the fact that I am not insecure or non-committal because of what has happened to me. I'm screwed up. Like everybody is. That's who I am, and I am still worthy of respect and love. So, besides being a technically well-crafted film, I have to say that with what turns out to have only been her sophomore feature film project, Sophie Brooks actually created a, dare I say it, a really important romantic screwball comedy. The climax might leave a little something to be desired, the conclusion might be a little too pat for my taste, but again, as I wrap around to how I introduced my love for this movie, there are so many different elements of Oh Hi that I see being in communication with other films from this year. With Hurry Up Tomorrow, you had, albeit in the form of a psychological thriller, a very similar story about this guy who has insecure attachment issues that lead him to lead on and sexually manipulate women, only for an ultra-obsessed crazy girl to tie him to a bed and force him to finally confront the motivations underlying his behavior. With Materialist, you had Celine Song delivering her own sophomore feature attempting to critique dating and relationships, who we become attracted to, and why love sometimes isn't enough, but also why sometimes it seems like some people just want to be in relationships and have a certain kind of partner more than they know why someone is right for them. With Eddington, you have another film that quite honestly could have been called a screwball comedy, or rather a close cousin of the screwball comedy, the madcap comedy. This is where we get into the to Bringing Up Baby. This is where we get into the duck soup territory. Anyway, Eddington is a great comedy about how our smartphones are all slowly driving us insane. And yet, in a single montage of Iris disappearing down an internet rabbit hole on her own phone, I gotta say, Ohai might say just as much as Eddington does in just a few minutes, and not only without making it the premier focus of the movie, but kinda grounding it in superior dramatic territory in terms of its relationship, not to some extreme political or social moment, but like just the mundane trials of day-to-day life. With Song's film, you find yourself being constantly pinned in by how, on the one hand, as a writer and a director, Song does such a good job of impressing upon you the dark reality that we have uncovered through modern social science and evolutionary psychology, that much of dating and relationships really is just a cruel fitness regime, and quite frankly, the majority of us, if we are feeling more lonely and anxious and hopeless, it's probably because more than ever before we are able to be exposed to the most unrealistic, surface level expectations of what not only an ideal companionship, but what an ideal mate for us would look like. But for however much I loved that film and Materialists really resonated with me, I can't help but admit that whenever I encounter people who didn't quite see what all the fuss was about with it, that I have no answer to anyone who says that it didn't do a good enough job of resolving that tension between the cruel realities of mating and what Song seems to just fall back upon as this fantastical cliche view of romantic love, superseding everything else. Oh Hi might not get as granular, and it might not be as insightful because of it either, but it does just kind of have that crucial insight that Materialist is missing, and that makes all the difference in that one small way. When Iris's best friend, Max, finally has to have the heart-to-heart sit-down with her that, like, this is the second birds and the bees conversation, it's not so much that it's not about love, it's that love is not enough. You cannot manifest reality with your feelings. You have to accept and be secure with the fact that we are all just screwy people ping-ponging off of one another, and the relationships that work are as much happy little accidents as they are satisfying tales of woo. And while Hurry Up Tomorrow, I think, is a disturbing, blisteringly caustic excoriation of exactly that kind of toxic male archetype for whom the superficial performances of a need for intimacy and closeness and understanding is all just a fig leaf for the fact that they just want to run through women that they manipulate into being emotionally deferential to them, only so they can spurn them and label them as a crazy bitch when it's convenient. It's almost certifiably a movie about that sort of character being made by a guy who almost certifiably could be that sort of character in real life, which means that it's compromised inherently by giving even that moralistic critique of that character a suggestion of romantic depth and significance that it just doesn't have. Whereas at the same time that she and Gordon are able to craft just this lovely, humoring portrayal of this archetypal crazy girl with deep, insecure attachment issues, Brooks' treatment of Lerner's character, the very same guy who really is that guy, that soft boy, as opposed to a boy. It's not just about casual sex for him. He really, like, almost has a kink about pretending to be a boyfriend without actually having to be a boyfriend. Going around doing relationship shit with women he doesn't want to commit to, trying to get maximal reward for minimal input. Oh Hi manages to do, frankly, just as good a job of rendering that character in a non-spectacular, non-romantic, but accessible way where you really start to understand from just a bog standard human perspective. Oh, neither the crazy girl or the boy or the soft boy are that representative in the general population. I mean, they exist, but a lot of these archetypes are simply being applied to people who, if you really take a step back, are not only just screwy, but screwy in ways that we kind of identify with. Even if she's portraying a stereotypical crazy girl, many so-called boys can watch Oh Hi and absolutely understand where she's coming from. By the same token, any so-called crazy girl can watch Brooks Crafting and Lerner's portrayal of this stereotypical soft boy and absolutely understand where they're coming from, because ultimately these gendered terms are just masking the fact that these characters are obverse of each other. Sure, manipulators and people with full-blown personality disorders exist, but do you really think that they are that represented in the general population for how much people talk about them? Or like exactly the sort of people who label them and talk about them in their own personal histories the most are kind of telling on themselves even a little. As I said, I would not know that I don't know. That's why a lean, funny, sexy, charmingly acted screwball comedy like Oh Hi, even if it's far from perfect, is, in my opinion, movie of the year material. The screwball comedy is important because it's there to say, while chewing on a carrot like Clark Gable, sorry folks, hate to break it to you, but the crazy girl and the boy, even the soft boy over there, are just two halves of the same coin. We're all just a bunch of screwballs bouncing off of the bumpers and clacking into each other. And, you know, sometimes two screwy people are just the right kind of screwy for one another. So you got your heart broken. That's why we say, them's the breaks. Like breaking pool balls. It's a pool metaphor. Anyway, for my movie of the year, which I certainly don't think needs to be the best movie of the year, I'm giving Oh Hi a 3.5 out of 5. Highly encourage everybody to see it. And on a final, lurid, thirstiest film critic on YouTube note, I will put Molly Gordon's figure up against Galactus as a spectacle any day. Way better reason to justify leaving the house and spending time in a dark room with strangers. I almost neglected to mention, usually I go to see a movie like this on a Thursday night and it's just me or maybe one other person. There were straight up a few people who came out to see this on a Thursday and we were all laughing all the way through it. Yay! With that, I'm getting out of here. Don't hesitate to shout out in the comments. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Otherwise, please share, like, subscribe, bell, yada yada. My name is Ian Garcia. This is Devotional Criticism and this was the new movie diary. I'm going to catch you guys next time.